A girl suddenly wakes up and goes in the kitchen and takes a pocket knife. After that, she took the car and drove away into the dense forest. It seems Iris is grieving over the loss of her young son, Matteo, who tragically died during a family hiking trip. Heartbroken, she goes towards the cliff to end her own life. Just as she was about to jump, a man named Richard approaches. Trying to comfort her, he tells her about how he lost his wife in a car crash. Iris was touched by his story and decides to step back from the edge. Iris follows Richard and they head towards their car. After saying goodbye, Iris opens the car door, but Richard's car was parked too close that she couldn't get in. Richard decides to help her and got out of the car with an umbrella. Iris was confused because it was a sunny day. Richard gets closer and suddenly attacks her with a stun device, binds her with zip ties, and shoves her into his vehicle. After a while, Iris wakes up in the backseat tied up. Clueless where he has taken her to, she tells him that her husband will be looking for him, but Richard didn't care. Desperate to escape, Iris took out the pocket knife she brought earlier and started to cut the zip tie. Richard reveals that he is taking her to a small place out in the woods. Iris finally frees her wrists and attacks him with the knife, causing a violent car crash. Iris tries to strangle him with the seatbelt, but he pulls the seat down and grabs her. Iris then picks up the knife and attacks him. She gets out of the car and begins to untie her leg. Richard gets closer to her as she calls for help, hoping someone will be nearby. Richard soon tells her that he injected her with a paralyzing agent that will soon incapacitate her within minutes. Iris runs desperately into the forest before she gets paralyzed. She started to count numbers with her fingers and realizes that her hand was starting to get paralyzed. So she put on a timer in her smartwatch, exactly 20 minutes, before she gets fully paralyzed. Slowly, her legs also started to stop moving, but she continued to move on. Richard, knowing that she won't be able to go far, chased after her calmly. He started to mock her by telling whether she had found a good place to hide. Iris hid beneath a tree and Richard was right above, searching for her. Suddenly, ants started to crawl on her body, coming out from the nearby ant nest. Iris screamed and, desperate, crawled to a nearby river and throws herself, letting the current carry her far from Richard. She gets closer to a tree, fallen in the river, and gets out crawling. After a few seconds, the timer runs out and she becomes fully paralyzed. An elderly man approaches her in a grass cutter and started to question her. Though paralyzed, Iris communicates with him through a series of eye blinks. Bill, the property owner, takes her in a trolley to his house. But before Bill calls for help, someone knocks on the door. Iris blinks rapidly and warns Bill. Bill opens the door and Richard pretends to be searching for his wife. Bill, suspicious, tells him to wait while he calls for help. But Richard gets in and began to look around the house. But Bill had already hidden Iris somewhere. Richard asked Bill to lend him a phone, pretending that he have lost his phone on the accident. Richard then manipulates Bill by telling him fake stories about how he loved her wife and about her mental illness. Iris was hidden right behind the couch where Richard was sitting. Bill started to believe him, and as he was about to tell him the truth, Richard's phone rings, but he told Bill that he have lost his phone in the accident. Bill realizes that he was lying and tells him that he have hidden Iris in the back of the house. Richard, on his way out, is pushed by Bill and calls 911 for help. They started fighting, but Bill beats him up and knocks him on the floor. But Richard picks up a knife, stabbing Bill in his leg and continuously stabs him in the stomach. Realizing that the police were on their way, he pours petrol around the house and sets the house ablaze. As flames consume the building, Iris regains enough mobility to pull on a cord, alerting Richard to her presence. He finally sees and rescues her from the fire and puts her in Bill's car and drive away. On their way, Richard receives a phone call from his daughter. The call disrupts his plans, as his wife announces an unexpected family visit to their cabin. Frustrated, Richard makes a stop at a service station to fill up the gas. While Richard was in the line, Iris looks around if there was anyone nearby. A family car suddenly parks in front of her to fill up the gas. Iris, slowly recovering her strength, manages to unfasten her seatbelt and leans towards the window. A kid comes towards the car and started staring at her. But before Iris can say anything, his mother comes and takes the kid away by telling him to stop wandering around. Iris watches them as she missed her only chance to escape. Richard then puts on her seatbelt and drive away. They finally return to his wrecked car and Richard changes his clothes and retrieve his belongings. But not long after, a police officer approaches their car and knocks on the window. Then Richard talks with the officer. It seems that the mother they meet earlier in the station has informed the police, sensing something was wrong. The officer, after seeing the car crash, tells Richard to tell him what had really happened here. Evil Richard tells him that after Iris lost her child, she started to drink heavily, leading to a car crash. But the officer felt something was off because Richard had a scar on his face, and the informant told him that they saw both of them in the station. At that moment, Iris, slowly recovering her strength, manages to roll down the window, which catches the officer's attention. Iris strugglingly tells the officer, "Help me," and her eyes directing him toward his belongings. But before he can act, Richard kills him with a tow rope by breaking his skull. Richard then took his gun and put the body in the car and sets the car ablaze, driving away. The journey continues to a lakeside, where Richard plans to dispose of her as he has done with his previous victims. Desperate to escape, Iris stabs him with the injection but fails to inject him. Richard then empties the injection and took out a knife from the back of the truck. He pulls Iris of the car and takes her to a boat. Richard then rows the boat in the middle of the lake and starts preparing to kill her. But Iris, as her dying wish, tells Richard to take out her son's toy boat from her pocket. But while Richard was reaching through her pocket, she grabs his knife and stabs him through the neck. Richard pulls the knife from his face and points the gun at her. Iris shakes the boat by her body weight and Richard falls in the water. Though he attempts to climb back aboard, Iris shoots him with his own gun, sinking the boat in the process. Struggling but determined, she swims to shore. On the bank, she finds Richard, barely surviving. Standing over him, Iris delivers her final words, "Thank you." From this movie, we learn from Iris is that we should never give up. Adios. Thank you for watching Movie Mind. Subscribe for more update.